Hey guys, Miss Osuna here, and we are going to create a croquis that's in an advanced pose with sequin dress. So go on ahead, start off with your oval and your straight line and set up each measurement. So all the head spaces should be the same distance, about 1 inch apart. And you want to make sure you have 9 heads. All right, at 1.5, we're going to do a shoulder guideline, left side higher, and the waist, the right side's higher. The waist is at 3. The crotch is 4.25. It's parallel to the waist. Now we're going to curve facing left and now facing right. We want the shoulders to be 1.5 head spaces wide. You know, you go back to that center to measure. The left side has more severe of a curve. Now we're doing our hip curve. Remember that this is really a nice strong curve on the right. It's flatter on the left. We're simply using those parentheses shapes. Waist up, the left side has more curve. Waist down, the right side has more curve. That's what helps us to have a very nicely balanced sketch. The shoulder is 1.5 head spaces and the hip is also 1.5 head spaces. Now find the center of our hip and do your shapes for the bikini bottoms. 2 frowns and a smile. Remembering that the hip guideline is at 4.25. Center of each leg. Now we're going to do an N as in Nancy, an N shape on the shoulder facing left. And now we're going to redraw the head, moving it over. So the head is just above the shoulder and the person is looking left. Now let's get ready to add our neck. On the right side of our head, go on ahead and parentheses shape facing right. And the left side, short parenthesis facing left. Let's add our bust guideline. It's about 2.25, parallel to the shoulder. Place the left bust just barely at the left edge of our torso. And it stops at 2.25. So that we'll see a little bit of the profile of the bust on the left. Now on the left side, we're going to have a parenthesis that faces left. So from our bust at the top edge up toward the shoulder, a soft parenthesis facing left. Next, for the right shoulder, we're going to do another N shape. So that's the right shoulder in the middle of our torso there, facing the right slightly. Now, underneath the chin, let's get ready to add a guideline. So from the chin, going straight down, going ahead and put a vertical guideline. That's a reference balance point. Next is a guideline for each leg. On the right, let's find the center of the leg and drag that all the way down, crossing over that center line at 5.5, finishing at the chin guideline on the left of our vertical. Next, let's draw in our thigh. We know that there's an invisible socket that stops for the knee at 6. So the upper thigh is straight, and then we have a parenthesis shape facing right at 6. The right side of our thigh, it's a parenthesis shape coming down and it narrows, stopping just above 6, because that's where our knee socket is, and the back of our knee is higher than the front side of our knee. Now we need a parenthesis facing left, and we stop at 6.5. Then we're going to drag this down to 8, where our invisible ankle socket is. Go on ahead and make sure that you drag it all the way down towards 8. Now we have diagonal line on the left side for our foot. So drag that all the way down to number 9. That's from 8 to 9. And then a smile. And then another diagonal line on the right side. And that is the front view of our foot. And that's our anchor leg. We always do the anchor leg first. Let's move on to the next leg. We find the center of our left leg and we drag that diagonally down all the way towards the left side past number 9 so that we can create the illusion that the left leg is closer to the eye. Now we go back to create the upper thigh on our left leg. So from our bikini bottom at the inside of the crotch, we head diagonally down and just a tiny bit below 6, because this knee is lower, we create a parenthesis facing left for the kneecap. Now we're going to create the left side of our thigh. So from the bikini bottom area, head down towards 6, but you stop a little higher because there's an imaginary socket there. Next, we do our parenthesis facing right for the back of our calf muscle. And on the kneecap side, we have less of a curve, but it still slightly has a parenthesis facing right. So now that we've started, now we're going to face left so we can create that long calf and drag those all the way down toward number 9. As you get toward number 9, remember there's an imaginary ankle socket. From the ankle, we're going to do a diagonal line to the right, and then we'll do a smile. And on the left side ankle, diagonal line, and we connect the smile. We're making sure the left foot is lower than the right. It finishes at about 9.5. For the shoulders, we want to note that the N shape faces right on the right side, and it faces left on the left side. Now let's draw in shoulder to elbow. So here we are on the right side, landing at the guideline for our waist. Now we have our elbow diagonally upward from that guideline. Let's go on ahead and draw the wrist to elbow guideline. That's literally a diagonal line. And we flesh that out on the left and right. So soft parenthesis shape on the left of the guideline and right. Very soft shapes. Now diagonally connect the shoulder to our forearm. On the outer edge on the right of our shoulder, going ahead and give a little more meat, connect it to the elbow. And go all the way back up so that we have a full connection. Now for the hand. We do diagonal line upward on the right. Do a diagonal line upward on the left. That's from wrist to knuckle. Now we go horizontally for the beginning of our fingers and a W shape to show our knuckles. From there, we head downward for knuckle 1 and downward yet again to represent knuckle 2 to the fingertip. And then a smile and a straight line up. Let's repeat for the middle finger now. We start off with a horizontal line and we're coming down the first knuckle and down for the second knuckle. Make it longer than the first. A smile and a straight line back up toward our W. Do it once again. Horizontal, down, and this is shorter because it's our ring finger. A smile going back up. So we didn't add both knuckles on that one. Pinky finger. Horizontal, down, smile, and frown up to connect back towards the hand. Notice the pinky finger is aiming downward further away from the ring finger, as that very often gives a little bit more dynamic when your pinky finger is either up or further down. Makes your sketch pop out a little bit more. Now for arm 2, a diagonal guideline from the center of the left shoulder. This guideline is going to go approximately to the elbow. It can be long in the beginning, and then you can go back and measure shoulder to elbow distance. That's 1.5 head spaces to 3 in general. Next, we're going to need a guideline from elbow to wrist. So from our elbow guideline, we are going to aim towards the hip. For the hand, we're going to start with a diagonal line from our wrist towards the side of our hip. Diagonal line upward and one just above it. So notice those lines are on the left and right side of the arm guideline. Diagonal line downward for the beginning of our pinky, and the second portion of that line is down longer for the fingertip of the pinky. Now we add our W shape to represent the knuckles. Moving on to our fingers. Starting with the index finger, horizontal, and then downward. The second segment of the line is longer, so we have elongated, beautiful fingers and hands. Now let's bend that index finger. A second diagonal line under the first, and it's pretty short. And then back to the first line, we go downward. Now we simply smile up from the fingertip and connect it to our second line. Next finger, diagonal line, and a second that's longer. Smile up from the bottom, connecting back to the W. Third finger, diagonal line. The second portion is longer than the first portion. Smile up, head back. Make sure that that ring finger is shorter than the middle finger. Now for the pinky. Starting at the W, diagonal line coming downward. Smile up, connect back to the hand. Now that the hand's in place, let's flesh out the elbow to wrist portion of our arm. Here we are with a parenthesis shape facing downward and then a second parenthesis facing upward on the left and right sides of our guideline. Now do the same type of parenthesis for the elbow to shoulder. You've just completed your advanced croquis pose. And now let's get ready to transfer this onto our marker paper. Grab some tracing paper. I have 2 sheets here put together because I draw in a very large size. And start tracing. Remember, tracing is where you can stylize and trace and adjust, keeping the lines you want, leaving the lines that you don't want completely off. So play around. Maybe you're going to add a thinner waist or a wider waist. Maybe you're going to add thinner arms or wider arms. Possibly you will use a wider hip or a more narrow hip. This is your chance to make your changes now that you've done the foundation work. Trace off the entire sketch, making sure to push hard so that you have enough lead on your tracing paper that it will easily transfer over to your marker paper. When tracing, I typically use a very soft lead pencil, such as a 4B or even softer. Stay away from a hard pencil designated with the letter H in the title. So for example, if your pencil is 2H, that indicates that there's a certain level of hardness to it. So I'd stay away from a pencil with an H, and I would use a B with a higher number, like a 4B, 5B, etc. Now that we've traced, we simply flip over our tracing paper so the lead faces the marker paper, and we rub it off. You could put masking tape to hold it in place. I'm just going to use my hand. I use the back of my Copic marker, and I push and rub all the lines I've created. So this way I can transfer my sketch nicely onto the marker paper. Now the sketch is on our marker paper. Let's talk about the supplies we're going to need moving forward to actually draw a sequin dress on this lovely sketch. We're moving into 4 shades of a purple design marker. Normally we do 3, but this is very advanced, so we're going for 4. Then to deepen the shade, we're adding a deep umber, so it's a dark brown color. And you'll also need to further get depth, a black. Aside from those markers, we're going to use a 000 watercolor brush. So tiny, tiny, tiny brush with the long hair, and also acrylic white paint. We're just using a bit of the paint, followed by the white gel pen. Do you hear that music change? It's about to go down. Let's get into it. Okay, we're going to lightly draw in our dress. From the right side, we are going to have an asymmetrical neckline. So that's right shoulder, and it goes down lower and off the shoulder on the left. Make sure that you extend tiny little bit above the shoulder with the smile facing left so it wraps around the shoulder. Now for the actual shoulder itself, it's diagonal and then a parenthesis facing right. Make sure that that armhole extends a little bit underneath the body to the right. Next, we're going to do the bottom of our bodice. So there's a frown downward, the left side's higher, right side lower. And the opening, we have a cutaway at the center front. Now for the lower portion of our dress, the skirt portion. At our left hip, we have a parenthesis that faces left. It's close to the hip, and then at the crotch, it starts to face left. On the right side, it faces right. So it's close to the hip, then it faces right. Next, we just erase our bikini bottoms because this is not a see-through fabric. We're creating a sequin fabric that you cannot see through. So erase the center where we have our bikini bottoms. Now you're going to do your series of smiles and frowns for the hemline. So smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown, smile. I usually like the left and right to end on a smile. Now we're simply going to erase the rest of our legs, and then we're going to add in the fullness at the bottom of our hem. The fullness at the bottom of our hem is created by having diagonally shaped parentheses. They're wider at the bottom, more narrow at the top, but they don't touch at the top. That's a great distinction to make here. Starting from the bottom, and we're dealing with the frown on the right side. Diagonally shaped upward, and now left. Notice we're putting them on the left and right sides of the frown portion only. More pressure when you start, less pressure when you let go. Grab your supplies. Remember, we have 4 shades this time. So not our standard 3 shades because this is a more advanced technique. The lightest shade is always the one that we start with first, and we're adding a dark umber for the depth. So that's a brown being added to the purple. And then once again, we are going to have highlights with our white acrylic paint. We're just using a tiny little bit of it, not that much at all. We're going to be using the black ballpoint or fine point tip. So like a black micron might be great. My micron dried up, so I have a different one, but it'll work just fine. We're adding that black Copic marker to our purple, and that's just a tiny little bit on the very outer edges. Okay, let's get started with our lightest shade. And we are going to start at our shoulder, and we are going to fill in just the lightest bit on our neckline and our armhole, following down the bust on the right side underneath those fingers. Start to add some dots after you filled that in. That's the beginnings of our sequins, using only the point tip of the marker. So first we filled it in, and then we added the dots for our sequin. Now I'm moving into the fine tip and adding more dots, and they're on the inside, so underneath where we just left off, toward the inner portion of our dress. Now we have some contrast. That's 2 different sequin dots that we've created. Now with the same marker, we're going to move and start underneath our bust, and the strokes are going downward. So we start with a smile and the strokes go downward. Then from the bottom of our seam going upward. So those outer left edges are darker. Now here on the right side, we're coming down in a parenthesis shape. And then from the bottom of that same seam, we're going upward. Now we're filling in under the bust on the right side with a smile. Then we go downward in nice short strokes. And darken those outer edges to your preference. Now we're going to start adding dots. We're still on the brush tip side of our lightest color. Those dots are on the inside, and they are not so much in the shaded areas. Here on the right side and left side of our bust, we just want to define the hand and the edges of our bust and the edges of our finger. So under the hand, stroke downward, short strokes. We're just going to create a little shadow under the fingers. So just use the tip of your marker for this and define those edges right underneath the fingers, and then stroke downward. Now you can add these dots that are going to begin to represent our sequin. Define the edge above the fingers and above the hand and stroke upward. Add more dots. This stippled dotted effect is going to look like sequin. Continue to add more dotted effects to fill in the beginnings of a sequin fabric and a sequin look. And as you add these dots, you want to be sure now to spread them around, but still keep lightness toward the center of the bust. So don't cover it completely. Now I've switched over to the fine point side of our pen, and continuing with the stippled dotted effect. We are off to a great start. Get ready because we have lots more to do coming up in part 2, but for now, that concludes part 1 of Rendering Sequin with me, Miss Osuna. See you next time.